Every time someone asks me which plant they should start with, Philodendron are always at the top of my list. They are absolutely beautiful, super adaptable, which makes them great houseplants. They're really forgiving, but they do have some care quirks that make all the difference. And if you've ever brought home a philodendron and thought, why don't my leaves look like the ones I see online? You are not alone. These plants actually transform as they mature, and today I will talk through the steps to help you get them to that next stage. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by rePotme.com. With rePotme, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. Philodendron are known for their leaf transformations. So they have their juvenile phase and their adult form leaf phase. So as you can see on this Spiritus Sancti philodendron, the juvenile leaf looks very different than the adult form, and this isn't even fully adult form leaf yet. So the juvenile leaves on philodendrons will be much more simple. They're obviously smaller, but they'll be heart-shaped. They won't have super distinguishing features. So sometimes it can be hard to tell what type of philodendron you have because it's hard to tell because all the leaves will look really similar until they get to the adult form. And most of us as philodendron lovers are trying to get to that adult form leaf shape. So the adult form will be much more easily distinguished. It usually has lobes that are developed. It might have fenestrations in the leaves. It will be a lot larger. So the adult form leaf shape, like I said, looks totally different. And I'll be talking today how to get your plant to that stage, like I said. And a lot of times it involves climbing, all sorts of different little care tips that you can do that will get it to that point so your philodendron can have huge, beautiful leaves that we love so much. There are over 450 different varieties of philodendrons, but there are only two types of philodendrons. There's climbers and crawlers. Climbers want to do just that. They want to scale upwards, and they will size up when they're properly supported, and you'll be able to get big, beautiful leaves like what we're trying to achieve. Crawlers actually spread along the ground, so for them, like a wide, shallow pot would be best so that they have room to grow. Sometimes you can tell what type of philodendron you have based on the growth pattern, but if you're not sure, I recommend just doing an easy search online, and it will tell you exactly what type of philodendron you have, and you can adjust your care accordingly. As I said, climbers need structure, and what you choose really makes a big difference, and I've also heard that even crawlers can kind of be trained to be climbers. So here are your different options and the pros and cons of each. Moss poles have a natural look, they hold moisture, and they encourage those roots because of the moisture that they have, but they do dry out quickly, which can be a little bit of a challenge, and they can also get pests in them. Next up are the core poles or cocoa core poles. They're easy to find, they're really sturdy, but they don't stay damp like moss does, so it's not as encouraging for those aerial roots, but they're a lot less likely to become like pest prone, and you don't have to water them as much. Then we have wooden planks or boards. Now these are really stable. They're perfect for some types of philodendron. The roots need texture to grip on, so don't use painted boards. I've made that mistake in the past myself. And you just might want to up your humidity or maybe moisten the boards a little bit to help those aerial roots attach. Then you can use like plastic or reusable poles. These are durable, extendable. The roots won't grip on it naturally, so you will need to use ties. Then you can just make your own, like whether it's stakes or trellises or bamboo. There's so many cheap and customizable options, and all of these can encourage nice large leaves. So high level, how do you grow those large oversized leaves? First off, support, which we've just talked about. Light is incredibly important. I'll go more into light, but you want enough light to help these plants have those nice big solar panel leaves. Humidity and feeding are really important. You want a higher humidity. That's really important for these plants because in their natural habitats, they have higher humidity. A lot of them are from tropical rainforests, so they'll want that for those large leaves, and they really need to be fertilized regularly. They're limited to the nutrients in their pot, so you want to make sure you're doing regular fertilizing so they have all the nutrients needed for the big beautiful leaves. I'll go in more detail on all of these topics. And the last one is one that is probably the most important and that we like the least, and it's time. It can take years for these plants to grow to their full potential indoors because we don't have those conditions like you have in a greenhouse or in the rainforest. So I do always say, if what you're really wanting are large beautiful leaves, try to purchase a plant that is as large as you want or as close to it as possible. That way you don't have to wait for all that time and all those years for your philodendron to grow those huge leaves. But you can get there, it will just take a long time. Philodendrons do have blooms, and I've had quite a few philodendron bloom, and I get asked a lot of times, what does that mean? What should I do with the blooms? So it's a sign that your plant is healthy and that it's mature. It takes a while for philodendron to get to that point where they're able to bloom, and it's a really good sign actually. However, these blooms do drain energy from the plant, and most of us aren't really into the philodendron blooms. They aren't that impressive. So I just recommend cutting them off. That's what a lot of growers do, and that way the plant can just mainly focus on energy, putting that energy into the leaves. So more specific on lighting, these plants like bright indirect light. What the heck does that even mean? Think of it as a rainforest canopy where the light is just kind of coming through and it's nice dappled light. So I would say nice bright morning light is totally fine because the UV is going to be lower in the morning, just like it's harder for us to get a sunburn with bright morning light, but more likely to in the afternoons. Philodendron are going to experience the same thing. So I'd say like an east or west facing window is great, and if that's what you have, like put it directly close to the window. Now if you have a south facing window where it's getting that blasting afternoon light, I believe it's south facing, if that's the case, just pull it back a little bit, or maybe use a sheer curtain. But I think philodendron probably need more light than most people think they do. So I would always err on the side of maybe giving it too much light, and then if you're noticing that the leaves are looking really faded, or if they're looking a little bit sunburned or crispy, at that point just pull it back. Now if you are noticing some crispy leaves, that could be a humidity issue and not necessarily a too much sun issue. But what I would say is keep an eye on the new growth, because those old leaves might crisp up because they were used to really high humidity in the greenhouse where they came from. But these plants adapt. Again, like I said in the beginning, what makes these plants great is how adaptable they are. So it'll adapt to the environment and circumstances in your home, which is awesome because we don't live in greenhouses, most of us, unless you're like in Florida with perfect weather for these plants. So the new growth, if the new growth is looking good, it's not looking crispy, then don't worry about pulling it back from the window. But if that new growth is looking like it's getting sunburnt, maybe pull it back from the window. And if that new growth is crispy, like on the outside of the leaves, you may want to incorporate a humidifier or something to up the humidity in your home, especially in the winter time when we have like a lot of heat. I know in Michigan I use the heat all the time, and a lot of my plants were getting crispy. Although in the winter time, a lot of these plants go dormant and they won't be putting out a lot of new growth anyways. So during the summer months is when we'll see most of that new growth, which is great. If your plant is looking really leggy, it probably means it needs more light. As you can see in here, I don't know, let me move this out of the way. I have grow lights everywhere in here. There are so many different great options out there. I would highly encourage grow lights. There are a lot that look like regular natural house lamp lights that you would have, and nobody would ever know that they're grow lights. So don't be deterred by grow lights. They're really great, and they've been a lifesaver for me and a lot of people with their plants. Watering philodendrons is really easy. Water them when they're about halfway to fully dry. You can use a moisture meter if you have like a huge pot and you're not really sure if it has enough moisture in there. You can check and see. Most of them also have pretty thick leaves, which makes them somewhat drought tolerant because they will store a good amount of water in their leaves. Not all of them. So this one here, this Philodendron morshuezii, I think is how you pronounce it, has pretty thin leaves. So this one needs to be watered more regularly. And how I know sometimes this one is ready for a drink when the other ones aren't is that the leaves will start to droop. So if you're noticing your leaves are kind of drooping, but the soil, check the soil first, make sure the soil is not wet or moist. And if the leaves are drooping, you'll know it's ready for a drink. So some signs that your plant needs to be watered, obviously the droopy leaves, but signs that it's being overwatered are if the soil is moist and it starts to get like really brown spots all over the leaves. They start to turn yellow, and it's not just the old leaves that are turning yellow. It's very normal for old leaves to kind of die off as the plant is producing new leaves. And as they're dying, just chop those leaves off. You don't want it to like take too much energy from the plant on those dying leaves. But if it's the newer leaves that are starting to brown and just suddenly going brown, definitely that sounds like it's where your soil is retaining too much moisture. If you have a well-draining soil mixture, like a proper philodendron soil mixture, you won't have to worry about that. So I'll be sharing like a proper soil recipe that you can use, really simple recipe for your philodendron. And you know, these plants need to be repotted once every couple of years. So it'll be nice because for those couple of years and you have the right type of soil, you won't really have to worry about is your plant holding on to too much moisture, the soil holding on to too much moisture. And overwatering becomes less of an issue. And overwatering is the quickest way to kill our plants. I am going to be repotting these two beautiful philodendron today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about soil. So a great soil recipe would be like a chunky, airy aeroid mix. So that would be, I'd say a good mixture would be like a 50% potting mix, which will help retain moisture, and then 50% other substrate. And it doesn't have to be exact. It can be what you have at the house or what's easy to find at your local stores or online. But some options are like an orchid bark mixture is great because it has like chunky bark in it. It usually has activated charcoal. Pumice is really great. It's inexpensive, it's easy to find, and you can get a lot of it for really cheap, and it'll help the soil drain out. You just want a really chunky blend. Now, if that feels like a lot to you, you can get a customized soil blend, and there are all different ones on the market, and it will say it's specifically for aeroids or specifically for philodendron, and that's what I'm using today. As I mentioned at the beginning, I am partnered with rePotme.com, and they're wonderful for plant supplies. And they actually sell houseplants now, which is really cool. But so today I'm using their Philodendron Imperial Potting Soil Mix. I am addicted to all of their different soil blends. They're just wonderful quality, and again, I don't have to worry about mixing up my own soil. Now for pot size, you want to go 1 to 2 inches bigger than the root ball. You don't necessarily want to go 1 to 2 inches bigger than the previous pot. Most of the time when you're repotting, it's usually because it's root bound, right? Like the roots are coming out the bottom, it's slowed its growth. Things like that are signs that your plant needs to be repotted. And I've done a whole video on how to know when your plant needs to be repotted and like signs to look out for. But sometimes when we buy plants from the store, it'll be in a pot that's like way too big. So again, go by the root ball. Don't necessarily go by the size pot it's already in. And there are different options for the type of pot. So if you tend to be somebody who's an underwaterer like I am, you wait a little bit longer in between waterings, you can go with plastic or ceramic because it will help to retain some of that moisture a little bit longer. And if you're somebody who just likes to regularly be watering your plant all the time, then go with something like terracotta because terracotta will wick away moisture. So this plant looks really healthy. It's great to repot plants and kind of just take a minute to look at the roots. I always recommend watering your plant a few days before you repot because it allows those roots to be hydrated and you have a less likely chance of like tearing those roots. These are really healthy looking roots. You see how they're white, they're creamy. Sometimes with philodendron you'll see orange roots. That's very normal. If it's a red philodendron you might see red roots. As long as they don't smell bad, they're not mushy, black, brown, then you're in a good spot. If they are mushy and black and brown, then you have root rot and you'll want to trim back those brown roots and just take measures to kind of save the plant. A lot of times if that root rot's really bad and it's on most of the roots, the only way to save the plant is to propagate it. Chop and prop. So I'm just going to loosen the soil up a little bit. I try not to do too much with the roots because I don't want this plant to spend a lot of time repairing root damage. I want it to focus on growing new leaves. So this plant is called a Spiritus Sancti Philodendron, and I found it recently for about $50, and you'd say $50, that's expensive for a little philodendron plant, and it was actually a lot smaller when I got it. It's grown very quickly. This plant used to be $10,000, can you believe it? But since all of us planty people have started buying up all these different house plants and had more demand for more uncommon plants, they're starting to come onto the market and be much more affordable. So it's very exciting times for the plant world. And I'll warn you, once you get into like hunting for uncommon plants and just plant collecting in general. So here's the root ball. It was pretty snug in its pot. So I'm gonna pick something that's 1 to 2 inches larger than the root. I think this is a little too small. That's good. It has plenty of room to grow in there, and it's gonna love the new chunky soil recipe. I like to use clear nursery pots. A lot of people do. And what I'll do is I'll put it in the clear nursery pot, but then I'll actually place this nursery pot into a cover pot that's really like aesthetically pleasing. But I can switch out cover pots without having to repot my plant until it's ready. Also, the clear pot gives me an opportunity to keep an eye on the moisture in the soil, keep an eye on the roots, and a lot of these clear nursery pots and nursery pots in general have a lot of drainage. So any pot that you put your plant into needs to have a lot of drainage. Otherwise, the water's going to stay sitting in the pot and your poor plant is just going to get root rot so quickly. I bought this one for around $45. Again, this was more of an expensive purchase. I bought this plant a while ago and it is desperate for repotting. Look at those roots. And ever since I got this plant, you can actually get it for a lot less. So if you end up liking these plants, you can find different ones online probably, or check out your local plant shops. I'm finding there's great plant shops popping up all the time. Also, a lot of uncommon plants are making appearances at big box shops, which is really exciting. The problem with going too large on a pot is that there's going to be a lot of soil compared to the root ball, and the roots aren't going to be able to absorb a lot of moisture compared to the amount of soil that's in the pot. And then what ends up happening is there's a lot of moist soil sitting there for a long time while the roots are like actively trying to absorb all that water. There's only so much they can. And it just ups your chances of root rot. The reason I'm not that concerned that this might be an inch too big or a little bit too big is that the soil I'm using is well draining. So I know that it's not going to become overly saturated with moisture. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more forgiving with everything to have the right kind of soil. And the repotting process itself is super easy. A little bit in the bottom. You want the crown of the plant or the top of the root ball to be level with close to the top of the pot. Here's what the soil looks like. There's a lot of perlite. There's chunks of orchid bark in there. You want to give it a little shim shimmy? Shim shimmy? And the clear pots are nice because you can see if there are gaps. And once it starts to settle in, you know it's working because the top of the soil kind of sinks down a little bit. You might need to add a little bit more. Kind of press it in just a little bit, not too much. Give it another little shimmy. Another little shimmy. And repeat the process. Little shimmy. And a little pat all the way around. This philodendron definitely needs some support. This is the only thing I have on hand and it'll be perfect. There we go. That looks great. It's got some support that it needs. Ever since I put grow lights in here, my plants have been thriving. So that's why I'm trying to like get on top of repotting because of all the like blast of new growth that I'm seeing. These are also really helpful. A lot of the plants that I don't have in cover pots, I will put in these and it helps to catch the water. And sometimes when after I've watered the plant, I kind of like to let it sit in the water a little bit and absorb some through the root system. And then after about 30 minutes or so, I will dump out the excess water. You never really want to leave your plant sitting in water. So I'm going to go ahead and water these guys. Allow the plant to settle. The first time you water a plant after repotting, it's always advisable to water from the top to allow the soil to kind of settle around the roots. So you see how it's well draining already, and you want to give it a really good drink. For the demonstration of this video, I'm doing it here. Normally I would do my first watering like this either in the shower or in the sink and just kind of water and water and water until the whole thing looks saturated from the outside. When you water your plants, you don't want to be restrictive on the amount of water. You want to wait until it's halfway to fully dry and then give it a really good drink, really saturate it, and then wait. And the time between waterings will depend on the time of year, the amount of humidity in the air, the temperature. Surprisingly, you think I'd need to water my plant more in the summer, but I don't. I have to water it more in the winter usually because of the heat in Michigan and how it dries everything out so quickly. So never just be on a watering schedule. Always check as you're doing. You can be on a watering schedule, but always make sure your plant needs it first because it can vary on how regularly you need to water. So you see how there's excess water here at the bottom? I'm going to let it sit in that for about 30 minutes. That gives the plant an opportunity to absorb up some water from the bottom so it gets fully moist throughout the soil. Consistency is what we're looking for. And then if there's any water left over, I'm going to dump it out. Humidity and temperature, I've already mentioned how important humidity is to increasing the size of the leaves. It's going to be really hard to get those large leaves unless you have high enough humidity in your home. And honestly, 60% and above is ideal for these plants. That's hard to achieve for a lot of us, so we incorporate humidifiers usually into our plant care routine. But if you can't do that, the plant will be fine. Like, again, philodendrons are very adaptable, but they may not have those huge leaves that you love. That's why sometimes it's better just to buy a large plant that's already to that stage, because when they're younger, it's going to take an extra long time without that humidity to get those big, large, beautiful leaves. It's going to take a long time. Now, if a ton of growth isn't super important to you, then these plants can adapt to that lower humidity and they'll be just fine. So for temperature, these plants are tropical plants, and my advice is always the same in all my videos, and it's basically if you're comfortable in your home, your plants will be comfortable in your home. Like, these plants would do great in a shaded, like, covered porch area where they get a little bit of morning light and they have lots of humidity and sunshine, but once it starts to get cool, these plants need to come back inside. Just like we get cold, they get cold too, and it's very quick that they can like get a blast of cold, freezing, and then the leaves will just completely die off, and it can really harm the plant. Even coming from the plant shop in the winter to the car, a lot of really good plant shops will actually cover the plants for you with like a paper bag or something so that they don't get that shock going from the plant shop to your car in that cold weather. We love these plants for their green leaves, and there's no way for them to get nutrients without us putting it into their soil. So you can use a balanced houseplant fertilizer. Philodendrons are easy. As long as it says for houseplants, it doesn't really matter what brand or if it's organic or synthetic. Just be really careful to read the instructions on the back. I've made so many mistakes with fertilizing where I over-fertilized my plants, and it causes a lot of health issues for your plants if you overly fertilize. Don't let that scare you. Please fertilize your plants. Just go a little bit conservative in the beginning. Read the instructions carefully. Start off at about half of what they recommend for the first couple of times you do it, and then increase as the growing months really ramp up. So in summer, you should be fertilizing at full strength, and then taper down in the fall. Most plants don't need to be fertilized in the wintertime because they've gone dormant, as I've mentioned. However, some plants will continue to grow if you have the tropical conditions. So in here, my plants tend to grow in the winter as well, so I'll be very conservative with it, but I'll fertilize occasionally during the winter months. Here are the ones that I tend to be using from rePotme. They work great. This one is organic, has a slight fishy smell during the first day or so, but my plants freaking love it. It's fish and seaweed, which plants love that. And then the synthetic one is amazing as well. It has no smell, and you use such a tiny amount of both of these that they last forever. Especially this one. I mean, I don't think I've ever had to get another bottle because you use half a teaspoon per gallon of water. So it lasts a long time. Some mineral buildup can happen, so it's good to just flush your plant every once in a while, which basically just means watering it where it for a long time and just let all those minerals flush out without it sitting in its own water for any period of time. All those minerals flush out. And another reason why it's good to repot your plant in fresh new soil every couple of years. Even if it's not super root bound, allowing that plant to have new soil will help it just get rid of all those old minerals and have fresh soil where it can absorb nutrients from the fertilizer. Also, a lot of times the soil will become hydrophobic, which means it becomes so compacted that it's not going to absorb much moisture or nutrients in the soil. So it's a safe bet, even if your plant doesn't need to be repotted every 1 or 2 years, to go ahead and repot your plant with nice, fresh, new soil. And if your plant doesn't need to be repotted every 2 years, especially philodendron, it's a good idea to take a look at those roots and why they're not growing out of the pot. You might need more light at that point. You might want to alter your care, what you're doing, because your plant should definitely need to be repotted and it should be root bound in 2 years. Maybe you used way too big of a pot to start off with. So, you know, it's always good every 2 years to take a look at your plant and assess what's going on. I'm gonna give this another couple minutes to absorb, because I can see that it's not really fully consistent throughout. It's always really helpful to know what to do if we see pests on our plant, and it's not the end of the world. As somebody who used to get horrible anxiety if I ever saw pests, I'm here to tell you, don't stress. First of all, there's lots of great products out there, and it doesn't matter what brand you get, but the two main things that I use are a combination of insecticidal soap and systemic granules. So insecticidal soap is great for spraying on the leaves. It gets rid of all the insects. You can leave it on the leaves, you can spray it, then wash it off, maybe give it another spritz if you're seeing something. It's a wonderful preventative measure for once a month going through spraying this. Also, just washing your leaves with water with like a powerful nozzle is a great idea just for pest management. The leaves will love it as well. The other thing I use, like I said, are the systemic granules. These go in the soil, and you don't want to mix it in a watering can. You just want to put it in the soil. It has the amounts on the back. And then water your plants as usual. And it has an active ingredient that will be absorbed by the plant, and it will kill off pests. This has also helped a lot with fungus gnats for me. Those little pesky, like gnat looking things. They lay eggs in the top layer of the soil. Systemic granules has solved my fungus gnat problem, as well as mealybugs, thrips, aphids. I could go on and on. The only thing that I've not seen success with are spider mites, which are like the little cobwebby guys. And this is the insecticidal soap will take care of your spider mites for you. So this is a winning combination. We have a super knowledgeable plant community, so if you have products and tips and tricks and whatever about philodendrons, please leave it below. I hope this video was helpful. Like I said, philodendrons are such a favorite in the plant community for good reason. I would just love to collect all of them. I have so many of them already, and they're one of my all-time favorites, as I know they are for a lot of us. If you want to see more planty videos, I have a lot of houseplant care videos, but I also do a lot of like plant shopping and fun stuff like that. Always like good vibes, relaxing, educational, that kind of thing. So subscribe if you want to see those in your newsfeed. We also have a great community on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and I hope I get to see you soon. Bye!